Um, he was wounded 13 times. He was in every major Indian battle in Kentucky except for Ruddle Station. That's why I said Squire was best known as an Indian fighter. The wound that he received at the the siege of Boonesboro was the most severe wound. It had gone into one shoulder, went through the shoulder, grazed the spine, took off 2 nodules of the spine, and embedded itself into the bone of the other shoulder. He still fought on for 5 days. Daniel came in one day to check his wound, discovered that the ball was embedded into the bone. They carried him. They had to cut real deep to get it out, of course. And they carried him to a bed, him and Jane. At that point, Squire looked at Daniel and he says, "Bring me an axe. I'm going to die fighting if the Injuns get over the walls." He was a fighter, no doubt about it. We have documentation that says Squire stood better than 6 foot tall, and the other document says that he was better than 6'3". So he was quite a bit taller than his brother Daniel. Daniel stood about 5'8", 5'9", broad across the shoulders and chest though. The Indian said that he was built like a small pony. Squire, I'd like to say this, in our presentation, we found that Squire was an amazing frontiersman. But you cannot find too much written about him. He didn't have John Filson writing his memoirs down like Daniel did. So in our presentation, what we hope to achieve is we hope to give notoriety to all the frontier people. You know, they were men and women of all talents. They could do it all, and Squire could. But the women were amazing on the frontier. You read about the siege of Boonesboro. Jemima, she fought like a man. So did little Lucy Phelps. My mom's maiden name is Phelps, and I go back to Tom and John that was at Boonesboro. And I make mention of Lucy fighting at the siege of Boonesboro, and her brothers George and Josiah, they fought well too. I'd like to tell you a story, if I might, from our presentation. Would you like to hear about the Battle of Cove Spring?
Yeah.
Okay. We was marching down that wagon road when Injuns rose up, started shooting at us with a canebrake. Well, I got behind this big old tree with this other man, fired my rifle, killed one Injun. Then I squatted down the weeds to reload. That other man who was behind that tree with me, he got shot. He come falling right on top of me. And then this big Injun, he come out of nowhere with his tomahawk up, going to deliver the death blow. He got up there and he seen me underneath that man. He swung at me instead, and he cut me right bad across my forehead. We started wrestling around. I dropped my rifle. He drops his tomahawk. Then he starts trying to grab my knife out of the sheath, stick me with it. Well, my blood had made it way too slippery. I was bleeding bad. But I had with me a 3-edged sword. I was able to draw my sword, and I run that Injun through. Oh, what a surprised look he had then. He was trying to back off of that blade. Well, I kept pushing it in deeper and deeper. And then he fell over a fence, broke my sword off, and he died. But you know, I've always said it was the best little Injun fight I was ever in. We both stood tall and we fought well. That's the kind of stories we like to tell in our presentations. Real life happenings. And you think about, one thing I want to thank Lisa for, she sent me some information when she invited us down for this event and trying to preserve the cemeteries of Kentucky. And it's a grand thing they're doing, folks. But she also put me on to another gentleman that is very important in Kentucky's history. And I'm thinking about starting a presentation on him. Robert Patterson. He was the first man to settle in this area. Robert Patterson was with the Boones at the Blue Licks. He was with them also at Clark's campaign of 1782 when they went up to burn Old Chillicothe in Old Town, and also at Battle of Pickaway. That's when Kenton and Squire and Daniel all scouted for Clark going up to this battle. Patterson seemed to be quite a frontiersman on his own. He also settled up, we're from a little town called Bethel, Ohio, All my family was from down here in Kentucky, but Mom had to move north to have me. I don't know why. My heart's in Kentucky, I might say that. But I think Robert Patterson would be a very interesting presentation. What do you all think on that? Yeah. Okay, that's what I needed to know. We might look into that. We also do Simon Kenton. We have our DVDs that we sell. I'm not here trying to sell them at this time. If you want one, we have a few with us. We also have some documents that we brought. They're kind of more visual aids. And if you want to come up and take a look at them, it's a sketch of Fort Boonesboro. We have Jane Van Clee's family tree. We just did a presentation today for the Brown County, Ohio Genealogical Society. Turns out the lady that invited us, her husband was related to Jane Van Clee's family. So I tied her into it. And she just lost her husband back in January, and she's really grateful for that. Yeah, that's another thing. If you visit Corydon, Indiana, 13 miles south of Corydon, Squire Boone Caverns, Squire's grist mill is still running today. They rebuilt the mill, but it's still on the same foundation that Squire built. Also, I didn't do it. I'm a retired cop, so I don't worry about it. Squire also built he gave the first sermon in Louisville, Kentucky. He built the first Baptist church in southern Indiana, the Goshen Church. It's still now, the Goshen Church was finally razed because of termites back in the 1940s, I believe, and they built a recreation of it, and it stands today. A lot of Boones are buried there. Are there any questions any of you would like to ask me at this time about the Boones or Kenton or anything you'd like to ask? Yes, sir.
Oh, didn't Simon Kenton throw Daniel Boone at Indians so they could get the full Boonesboro?
That's a story I love to tell. Now, if y'all don't mind, I'm going to revert back to being Simon Kenton now. People say that Kenton threw Boone into the Indians. I don't quite believe that. If I was under fire and I was running with a friend of mine, I'm not going to throw him away into the enemy. You have to stop and pick him up again and start running all over again. That's not good tactics. But the way I love to tell it, and I think this is the way it probably went down. Should I tell it as Squire or Simon Kenton? I tell this story on both presentations, actually. When I'm doing Squire, I like to say how Kenton come out of the woods. He had a deer over his shoulder. He raised his rifle, killed one Injun, threw that deer into another Injun, picked up Daniel like he's light as a feather. Started running for the fort. And then 2 other Injuns was coming at him. Well, he hunkered down and he took my brother Daniel and he plowed right through them Injuns. Now, some has got to saying that Kenton threw my brother into the Injuns. Well, it ain't so. He wouldn't have done such a thing. They were friends. But, they did bump heads a mite, though. It was an awful clunk. You could hear it all the way inside the fort. Knocked Daniel senseless, it did. And when they got into the fort and Daniel finally come to, I remember he told young Simon, he says, "Simon, you behaved like a man today. You're a fine fella." Young Simon told me later that he felt right proud he did. But that was a true story. I don't think that he actually threw him, to be honest. I think he hunkered down and they did.
The extra weight.
Yeah, use that extra weight. That's what I would have done if you stop and think about it. Yeah.